My name is Claire and I'm 38 years old. A year and a half ago, I married Mark, a man who came into my life like a force of nature strong, confident and always in control. With him, I embarked on the most exciting yet complicated chapter of my life, because a part of his past became part of mine as well. That part was Lucas. Lucas is 20 young, reserved and strikingly composed. He is Mark's son from his first marriage. Our relationship has always been distant but polite, balanced on an unspoken line of mutual respect and necessary boundaries. While Mark always encouraged us to bond, we never truly connected. But everything changed with this trip. Mark had planned a romantic getaway for the two of us to the Amalfi Coast. A beautiful hotel overlooking the sea, long walks along the shore, just the two of us, away from everything. It was supposed to be perfect. Then, the night before our departure, Mark's expression shifted. A shadow of concern crossed his face. "Claire," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I hate to do this, but I can't go with you tomorrow." I felt my chest tighten. "What?" "An urgent meeting just came up. It's a major deal and I have to be there." Disappointment surged through me. I had been looking forward to this trip, to escaping the daily stress and having Mark all to myself. I wanted to argue to tell him that I needed him there, but I could see it in his eyes. She felt guilty about it. "You should still go," he continued, taking my hand in his. "I don't want you to cancel. Lucas will join you. I'll be there in 3 days." "Lucas?" I hesitated, the idea unsettling. I had never spent time alone with him, and I wasn't sure how we would manage. But Mark looked so sure, so insistent, that I found myself nodding. And so, the next evening, I found myself sitting in a hotel room in Amalfi, alone except for Lucas in the room next door. We had arrived late, and I hadn't even seen the sea yet. The open window let in the salty air, whispering its presence. I tried to shake off the unease. Then, a knock on my door. I jumped slightly before opening it to find Lucas standing there in a loose t-shirt and comfortable shorts. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. "I can't sleep," he said simply. "I thought maybe we could go down to the beach." I hesitated. Spending time alone with him felt unusual. But this trip was happening whether I liked it or not. Maybe it was an opportunity to bridge the gap between us. "All right," I said finally. We stepped outside into the cool night air, walking toward the beach in silence. The only sound was the soft crashing of the waves. The moonlight shimmered across the water, casting everything in silver light. Lucas walked barefoot on the smooth stones, his hands tucked into his pockets. I stole a quick glance at him, noticing details I had never paid attention to before: the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence in his movements. "This place is beautiful," he said after a while, his voice softer than I was used to. "It is," I agreed, inhaling the salty air deeply. We found a spot on a flat rock, watching the waves. After a moment, Lucas turned to me. "I never really got to know you," he admitted. "You've always been, I don't know, distant." I blinked at him. "I never meant to be." He shrugged. "I get it. It's complicated. But tonight, I see you differently." His words made my breath catch for a second. There was something in the way he said "eat a quiet sincerity," as if he was noticing me as a person for the first time. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was unexpected. A small silence stretched between us before I stood up, brushing off my dress. "I think I should get some rest," I said lightly. Lucas nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll stay out here a little longer." As I walked back to the hotel, my thoughts tangled together. There was nothing wrong with our conversation, and yet something about it lingered in my mind longer than it should have. Determined to clear my head, I decided to visit the hotel's sauna in the morning. It was a small, dimly lit space with wooden benches and the scent of mint filling the air. I hoped the warmth would help me relax. I grabbed a towel and settled onto a bench, closing my eyes and taking deep breaths. The previous night's thoughts still swirled in my head, but I was determined to shake them off. Then the door opened. My eyes snapped open to see Lucas stepping inside. He hesitated, clearly surprised to find me there. "Oh," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't realize you were here." "It's fine," I said quickly, adjusting my towel. "Come in." I told myself it was normal, that this was just coincidence. But the quietness of the sauna, the closeness of the space, made everything feel different. Lucas sat on the opposite bench, his breathing steady. Beads of sweat were already forming on his forehead from the steam. We sat in silence for a while, but I was acutely aware of him being there. It was strange how just the presence of another person could change the atmosphere entirely. "This is a bit much, isn't it?" I said after a while, fanning myself slightly. Lucas let out a small chuckle. "Yeah, it's intense." I noticed a small machine in the corner, pushing out more steam. "Maybe we should turn it down." I got up and stepped toward it carefully, the floor slightly damp. But as I reached for the switch, my foot slipped slightly. I caught myself quickly, gripping the wooden edge. "Careful," Lucas said, standing up instinctively. "I'm fine," I assured him. I adjusted the machine, letting the steam ease down a little. When I turned back, I saw Lucas watching Menot in an intrusive way, just observing. "I guess this trip isn't turning out as planned," I said with a small laugh, trying to break the odd silence. "Maybe not," he said, "but sometimes things work out in ways you don't expect." Something in his tone made me pause, but before I could think too deeply about it, I took a breath. "I think I've had enough for now," I said, adjusting my towel. Lucas nodded, watching as I stepped past him toward the door. As I left the sauna, I felt a strange mix of emotions, none of which I fully understood. The morning sun outside was bright and warm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I tried to push away the strange tension from the sauna, chalking it up to overthinking. Maybe it was just the unfamiliarity of spending time alone with Lucas. After all, we had never been in a situation like this before. To clear my mind, I decided to spend the afternoon exploring the town. I walked along the winding streets of Amalfi, taking in the pastel-coloured buildings and the scent of fresh lemons in the air. It was beautiful, exactly the kind of place where I had imagined a romantic getaway with Mark. But instead, I was here with his son, navigating a dynamic I didn't fully understand. As I stopped at a small cafe, ordering an espresso, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mind if I join you?" I turned to see Lucas standing there, hands in his pockets. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat down, stretching slightly. "I was wandering around and saw you sitting here alone." I studied him for a moment. There was something different about him on this trip. At home, Lucas was always polite but distant, keeping to himself. Here, he seemed more open, more willing to engage. We sipped our coffee in comfortable silence before he spoke again. "You and my dad? How did you two meet?" I smiled, surprised by the question. "At an art gallery, actually. I was there for an event, and he happened to be there too. We started talking, and the rest just happened." Lucas nodded. Yeah, that sounds like him. He's the type to know what he wants. I looked at him curiously. And what about you? Are you like him? Lucas chuckled. In some ways, maybe, but in others, not at all. His gaze was steady, and I felt an odd awareness settle between us again. I quickly shifted the conversation. So, do you like travelling? I do, he said. I actually thought about taking a gap year before university, just to explore different places. But it didn't work out. Why not? He shrugged. Life got in the way, I guess. Responsibilities, expectations. You know how it is? I did. I understood that feeling all too well. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the town, stopping at small shops, tasting local pastries, and even taking a boat ride along the coast. It was nice, surprisingly easy. By the time we returned to the hotel, the awkwardness from before had faded, replaced by something lighter. But later that evening, everything shifted again. After dinner, I went up to my room and changed into a light sweater and comfortable jeans. The sea breeze had picked up, and the idea of a quiet walk along the shore seemed perfect. I was about to step out when there was another knock on my door. Lucas. I was heading down to the beach, he said. Figured I'd see if you wanted to join. I hesitated for just a second before nodding. Sure. The night air was crisp, and the sky above us was scattered with stars. We walked side by side, the sand cool beneath our feet. The sound of the waves filled the silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I'm glad I came on this trip, Lucas said suddenly. I glanced at him. Yeah? He nodded. I wasn't sure at first. I thought it would be awkward, and maybe at first it was. But now I feel like I actually know you. His words made something in my chest tighten. I feel the same way, I admitted. I never really took the time to see you beyond just Mark's son. Lucas smiled slightly. And what do you see now? I opened my mouth to answer, but stopped myself. I wasn't sure what to say. Before I could find the right words, Lucas suddenly pointed toward the water. Look! A small group of bioluminescent jellyfish floated near the shore, glowing softly beneath the surface. It was mesmerizing like tiny stars drifting in the waves. Without thinking, I stepped forward, letting the water wash over my feet. Lucas followed, standing beside me, both of us watching the glowing creatures in silence. For a moment, nothing else existed but the gentle waves, the soft light, and the quiet presence of the person next to me. And in that moment, I realized something had changed between us. Neither of us said it. Neither of us needed to. But we both knew